I'm very happy to follow a marketer because I asked our design team to make the logo bigger. Yeah, I'm very happy to be the last one speaking, not just because to be the only obstacle between you and lunch, but also because I feel everything will tie itself really well. I mean, you heard really good foundational things today, and AI is just an accelerator in what you already heard. So I'm going to talk about that. But first, I want to also address an argument we have with Essa. He doesn't know we have this argument. What he said when we kicked off was there's that debate, is it JourneyOps or journey management, right? So at least we agree that it's no longer about mapping, it's about management. And I thought there's a way to win this debate. It's no longer about management, it's about intelligence. So next year we'll see. We'll see what that takes us. But this really is true because we're now looking at journeys becoming something bigger, right? So you saw some examples today. If they're constantly maintained, if they're constantly updated, right? They're no longer containers of information. They can really power up your decisions, right? And what is that if not intelligence, right? Well, so well adjusted with the AI topic as well, right? But there's a bit of a pitfall. And I need to flex a bit now, right? I'm doing my doctoral thesis in philosophy of AI, ethics, most importantly. And what we're already observing is that if you overly rely on the large language models, right, that hopefully probably all of us have tried, you might lose autonomy, right? So that kind of ties very closely to what we just talked about, right? On the one hand, you need to power up your decisions, but do you really want to hand off all the decision-making power to a machine that lacks the context fully, right? Or might optimize for the wrong thing, in essence, right? So on the one hand, they can make us super efficient, at least the technology that is already out there, but at the same time, they also might constrain us, and especially in our creativity. And you see that with, stuff that is being churned out, basically, right? Works perfect for German soap operas. If they can produce scripts like that, you no longer need a writing crew, but probably would work way, way more horrible if we expect more original content to be produced. So let's keep that in mind, right? That tension is there, the autonomy paradox, if you will, right? Why is that important? Well, because first and foremost, what I want to talk about is not just about the technology that we're using, we're building, but we're also talking about a certain set of principles that at least in my team, we really, really are trying to be conscious about, right? It's no longer just about trying to be more efficient, because then we could say, hey, we no longer need experts, like a machine can do everything for you. Like buy this PhD level subscription for $20,000. If you heard this sales pitch, stop me. No, the idea is that really this is just another technology, a huge one. It's a breakthrough, by no means. I could spend 3 hours talking about how important this is. It's a pivotal moment in our history, but the point is to amplify you as CX experts, not to replace you. And that's really crucial, and sometimes we forget that, and I really wanted to share that with you today. Why? Because certain things are changing, right? We can start anywhere here. Also, stop me if you've seen this before. This is a very simplified view of hopefully also what you heard today is where the problems tend to be, especially when you're trying to start putting things together, even with mapping, right? It requires manual, tedious work, right? We saw those shares today, right? How much time it actually takes to pull it up. And you always need to start with baby steps. But the data became stale and static very quickly. Like we heard about the posters, right? They just collect the dust, right? In turn, it's super difficult to prove that there's an ROI there if you spend months and months and months of work, and it's very, very unclear what the value is in a beautiful poster hanging on the wall, or worse yet, in someone's drawer, right? And then, habits are formed, and people go back to doing things in their old ways, even if those posters exist, even if they felt like they can add value. But certain things are changing because of that technology out there, right? Certain things are changing. First and foremost is what I could call a quantified sentiment, right? So what does that mean? Well, think about the data points that you're able to collect even today, right? Every support call, every support chat, every support email thread, right? It has an underlying sentiment. Mostly painful, let's agree with that, but still, there's a sentiment behind it. Every sentence in that thread, every sentence in that log has a sentiment, right? It hides a need, it has a pain, it hides a potential gain. Hopefully, if your support teams work well, there's a lot of gain even at the end of it, right? You are already able to quantify that sentiment. Why? Because you can actually use that data. It's a perfectly valid, awesome data that is available. We're going to talk about blockers, why maybe it's hard to get to it, but it's available there. And that quantified sentiment is something that wasn't possible at this scale yet. It is now. So that's one. Two, enriching a journey, right? Doing it manually, continuously, takes a lot of time. Automations already exist. It's possible to do that. Because the current technology out there also is fairly, I mean, it's trained to do that. It's pattern detections, right? So for it to detect certain themes that are emerging there, right? It's possible, and you can actually automate that. If you have a properly set up pipeline to quantify your sentiment, you can actually use that to enrich your journey maps. So that's it changing. In turn, the result is something very exciting, which you can call dynamic journey maps. They're evergreen. They can continuously evolve, right? That's also already possible. And then in turn, that also means that it's a bit easier to not only get the buy-in, but it's actually easier to shorten the lead time from a problem to a solution. I'm not going to pitch that a tool is all you need. We've heard today how much more it takes, but the maturity is changing because you can start seeing the results. Like, of course, we need to start small. Habits, well, habits, they will always exist. Just you probably might have different set of habits. So that already is happening, right? I'm going to show you a bit in just a second, and I think it's a pivotal moment because I love this example. It's very similar to what happened in the 1970s. Is there anyone in the room who still remembers a spreadsheet, how it used to look like? Right, there we go, right? And what would it take to change it, to white it out, to update it, especially if you make a mistake, right? It took a single engineer taking an accounting class in 1970s to say, this is absurd, probably this can be better, right? Well, probably no one in the room remembers this because now we use this, right? Which is a next iteration of that, right? Taking something that was fully, purely paper-based into something that is now super collaborative. And that's the addition that, in this case, Google Sheets brought, collaboration. It's no longer a file, it's actually a collaboration tool. And of course, every SaaS product out there, first and foremost, competes with this, because who doesn't use spreadsheet? In this audience especially, right? So there's also an iteration in that because you can use a tool like Rows, right? Which basically helps you automate this even more, produce some charts and graphs, and collaborate further. Like, it's endless. But what I'm trying to suggest is where it started here and it ended up here to start, accountants first became very scared because they felt, oh, this is now going to become so easy that I will lose my job. So what happened at first was, if it used to take a couple of weeks to produce this, to send to the customer, to kind of get an approval and schedule the payments, it became super quick to do it with this, that accountants in the first, let's say, years of using VisiCalc, that's how the tool was called, they still delayed sending the spreadsheet to the customer because the customers didn't trust the spreadsheet because it was produced too fast, right? But what actually happened was no one lost their jobs. What actually happened is, and I kind of suggested it, every SaaS product is competing with this. Why? Because it's so easy to build something when you have a cell that has inbuilt function formulas, right? You no longer think so much. You no longer need to, in a way. So that kind of elevated us. But that was also a conscious decision there, right? Otherwise, we can also become Amazon warehouse workers, So there's a potential beautiful pivotal moment here, right, with that data. And how would that work? Well, basically, you have a bunch of data lying out there, I would argue, right? The problems are how can you access it easily, right? and what the insights are. We talked about insight quality today as well. If it's based on just a single set of data, right, you could increase the relevancy. If they sit in a journey where the data can continuously be pumped up and updated, and insights can be updated, right? And the decision making can be based on that data. So what is that journey intelligence then? Like how does it look like? Well, before I show you, I still want to show you a sort of a framework to think about this, right? And these are the principles that we kind of follow in our team. First, we believe, and when you're going to use those tools, when you're using any tool, and I'm not pitching any tool, I really don't care, genuinely speaking, which tools you can use out there, think about how well aligned those tools are with your goals, right? And personally, human goals, in essence, right? Because children using ChatGPT are showing less critical skills. They're not questioning the data that they're getting, right? So if it's happening there, we're no better than children. In a way, you still need to think about it, because not every system there is aligned with our human goals. That's important, right? Two, there is this thing, again, I said I need to flex a bit with my PhD thing. Embodied engagement, what does that mean? That means that your insights have to be grounded, produced with AI, have to be grounded in real customer experiences, right? So avoid anything that basically says, hey, we can summarize this from somewhere, you don't even talk to customers. Like there's a bunch of tools out there. Simulate a generic persona and talk to it, in a way. Type of garbage, I would say. No, it needs to be situated, it needs to be contextualized, it needs to come from your customers, in essence. Similarly, human values, right? At the end of the day. And this might sound weird, but I'll say this. I mean, it's not like it's not human, but every single system out there is based on just pure efficiency optimizations, right? That's the hidden secret of Jeremy Bentham, the most famous philosopher we've never heard of, that every single system is basically built upon, right? It's just cost benefit, it's just optimizations, right? But is that only it? Is that the only thing that you need to optimize for? Is there something else there, you know? Think about that. And most importantly, privacy, I would say, right? Privacy in the data, but also privacy in how you make decisions. You need to have that space, finally, to make those decisions. And the tools need to maintain the space for you to make that final judgment on what needs to happen. Don't outsource your decisions. And here's then an example that's very easy to pull, because we have it on our website. So I took a screenshot, because I was lazy. But we have this customer, a retail bank in this region, by the way, and they said, look, we have had 500,000 calls last year, specifically about one particular customer experience problem, and that was related with debit card life cycles. And they identified that all the issues there cost them 12.5 million euros, right? So that's, again, money on the table, right? And the question then is, okay, what can we do about it? Well, apparently they were able to, because at the end of the day, what they managed to do, they reduced the call count just because they quantified that sentiment. They managed to extract the insights, see where the actual problems are, right? Review it very, very closely. And within a year, with that one specific journey, they kind of gained back 1.3 mil. Just because they started using something that they haven't even considered, nor was there in the market to start with. And for them, you know, it was an 18 times return on investment. Down, yes. So how did that work? Well, that worked because we ourselves looked at how you do this, like those who map journeys. And this is the average time that it actually takes. It takes around 3 months to map something consistent, coherent, that captures all the problems, right? And in this case, we said, okay, their renewal experience is suffering. It takes them 30 months to get to anything that they could then start actioning against, right? Well, based on that, we started asking, what can we improve in that process? And happily, that technology was there. We filtered it through that, for those principles that I talked about, and we said there is a way to get it down. That is a Nielsen-Norman number. So 30 hours, typically for any journey map, right? We're just comparing that with what you can achieve in 4 minutes, in essence. And again, I'm just building it up. But this is how it looks. It's nothing special, to be honest, right? You just dump in your research and look, it updates itself, basically. It will play on loop. So you have something, now you have something more, you continuously add, and it does it for you, right? That's it. It's as simple as that. But it's very, very powerful because it is a customer journey. It's quantifying that sentiment. It's taking the data from various different data sources that you have. And most importantly, it's continuously and consciously reviewed by experts in our customer companies to make sure that the data is correct, to make sure that the data is true, right? Because we still don't believe that AI is doing everything correctly. It will never do that, right? But that's as simple as it is. So I'm sorry for the disappointment. There's nothing more magical, just a load bar and then more content added to that journey. But you no longer need to bring those cards yourself, in a sense. So what's stopping you from using that, right? Well, let me share a bit. Because again, I don't care about the tools that you use. I think these are an amalgam of problems that we face, and you heard some from Grace today as well. Well, first and foremost is data access, right? And that's a big one, right? Because the barriers exist not only in the tech stacks, but in the org charts, right? Not easy thing to do, but here's a recurring theme from today, and it is baby steps. The data that you can easiest access are online, in Trustpilot reviews, in forums, in Facebook comments, wherever. You might find it in any platform that your customers might just start saying that and complaining about any issues. I filled out very, very angry things to Norwegian Railways because of us being stuck on Jan 1st, you know, for 6 hours in total cold in the middle between Bergen and Oslo. I hope they will use the tool to find that comment, you know, because that was not a very pleasant thing. They do respond there, right? I think you have access to that data as well, right? So at least there you can start until you can start building that case to get to support, you know, which is the most sensitive probably data. The second one, of course, is GDPR, which again, easier to solve if you're going after more publicly available data, but it's data about you. So it's very easy to start at least with that. What are your customers saying out there that you can start bringing in? Limited data is another that we tend to hear, like we don't have it. Again, I think if you're building a new product, probably it's an argument that you can make, but then probably what are you doing if you're not talking to your customers or trying to understand the market? So at least interviews is something that you should be doing if you're building something new. If we're talking about something that already exists, come on, that's not even an argument. The data is out there. And finally, of course, there's the APIs and CDPs, like depending what we're talking about, you know, B2B or B2C in a sense. But the data is challenging to get to sometimes, I agree. It's a long process. It could take a long time to convince everyone in the organization. You saw the barriers, saw those examples. Again, start small. Start with the data that already exists. You don't need to have, or what we heard today, to build out the whole cathedral, you know, before you can focus on the right problems. So a real example, European airline, one that I really love and respect, actually took this for a spin and said, okay, can we actually challenge all of this? Can we actually see if AI can do a good job? And this is the same process that I would recommend you doing, because what they did, they first chose a very particular one, let's say proof of concept journey. They used the same data. Why I'm saying the same? Because they had two teams, one trying to do it purely manually, and another purely relying on the AI solution at that time. And what they found out along the way is that they're getting fairly good results, that the manual team fully switched, joined the AI team, and started doing this in a hybrid way, making sure that the data is correct, making sure that the results are correct, but they no longer went back to manual mapping because it just takes too much time to go through and read through every single comment, every single survey response, every single support log, every single interview that you have. So enough trust already you can have at least to start doing this. But you can also take this route. Just have two teams doing this one by one, and it's beautiful because you can really compare the results And especially if it's a provider you trust, you can talk to them and say, look, we're not getting the same result. And that's how we actually build the quality of our AI solutions. We're working very closely with our customers because they're kind of giving us those signals. So what do you do then is actually then you have something to show for your work, and you can say, look, this can be better if we add more data. And that's an easy argument to make if you can show something that has quantified, because that's the biggest problem with the qualitative data, right? It's sometimes hard to quantify that sentiment. Well, you can actually now. You can show this and say, look, these pains are big, but these are survivor biases, basically, right? These are only people who complained, only the people who reached out. If we invest more, we get more data. If we spin up a research survey, if we do some interviews, if we get to support logs, let's say, we can continuously make sure that this can become a greenfield journey and keep on continuing uncovering new problems. And then you can start optimizing, because you can start trusting the data sources, the sentiment that you're getting there, and the customers will only be happy. But again, I'm not saying the tool is enough. If you have the resources available to actually start solving the problems, that's a separate problem. So to reiterate this and to expand a bit, and again, this will be already familiar, it starts with a clear goal, which problem to start working on, and there's always a problem, right? We've heard that, right? There's always a problem. Choose one that you have at hand. Use your own data, please. And the data on a website where your customers are complaining is kind of your own data. Even if it's not directly in your system, it's somewhere else, it's your own data. Start communicating with your customers, especially if you're expanding the data sources, that you will be using that data. Please do that. I mean, it's a European audience, probably I don't need to say this. But still, tell them that you're doing this, because that transparency will give you more data. And your conversion rates also will increase, just because you will clearly say, this is how we're using it. This is how your experiences can be improved. Always, please, always do automations with oversight. Sit, review those results. The time you gain in mapping, if we take that example, should be invested back not only in trying to get more data in, but review those results. It's still going to be way faster, but it also builds up one additional thing. If someone asks you why that insight is legit, you will know why. Because you saw the results, you saw the comments, you saw the numbers, right? And you were the ones verifying it at the end of the day. That, again, is about enhancing your roles rather than replacing it. And then, of course, we talked about it, right? Every change needs to be documented. Everything you do needs to be fed back into the system. And we can then rinse and repeat. So where is this taking us, right? Well, first and foremost, if we start doing these things, we start using this technology in an appropriate way, with proper human oversight, I feel like a couple of things will happen, and I don't think we're gonna be shocked, because we saw some examples happening of that even today. There's that huge trend to hyper-personalization, right? Without losing that human touch, right? Because humans create experiences, what we heard like half an hour ago. Forecasting becomes possible, especially on qualitative data. That is, to me, the most shocking thing. Why? Because if you can quantify the sentiment, you can start forecasting it. Because that's the same thing how quantitative data works. You're building out predictive algorithms trying to detect where the trend lines will be. If you can quantify the sentiment, you can start predicting it. Especially if you're using tools that allow you to do that, right? But the most exciting thing is the fact that you can start looking at insights at scale and see how insights overlap across multiple journeys. Why? Because now you have a foundational system where all the data is fed in, looked at through a customer journey lens, and you can really rely on the system to help you find certain patterns. That's unheard of. And I mean, I'm not learning how to use this thing yet. And most importantly, I think what we're going to continue hearing more and more, and that's what I'm trying to do today as well, is to kind of put that spin on ethics more and more. With more data, more responsibility comes. So anything we're using, the tools that we're using, the technology we're using, the vendors you're using, please pressure yourself and communicate to your customers about the considerations and guardrails that you're taking. That actually is what makes Europe more unique in that mess of what we're having on the left and right side of the world, right? So yeah, the meaningful experience is neat. I would say first for AI to amplify your skill sets, not to replace them. Please think about transparent data processing. Make sure that you have high quality data. That's where the biggest investment should be made. Everyone who did that are now already benefiting from it. If the data is there, if it's clean, if you can trust it, it's very easy. Please start small. Always. Don't build a cathedral and then start thinking. Always supervise and see what the automations are producing. Don't trust anything that you're getting just because on the face value it looks legit. And please, then start focusing on the actual outcomes, of what you're doing. Because all of that will only increase and affect the whole process. And I'll end with this, with what I kind of started. Also a pitch from the Baltics, if you will. You haven't seen the film, I highly recommend it. But this is to me that example, that pivotal example of the spreadsheet moment. This animated film that just won, the Oscar for Best Animated Film, the Caesar Awards, the European Film Awards, the Golden Globe, was produced by a single dude in an apartment in Riga by using open source technology. The creativity was unleashed because the technology was designed and used appropriately. I think that's the same principle we need to apply when we use the tools and we choose the tools that we use as well. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.